So in this video I'm talking about chapters 4 and 5 in Pat Barker's novel Another World. In the previous video we talked about the first 3 chapters and the main characters, at least some of the main characters, and some of the thematics. And one theme that we touched on was that of the past, and that's something we'll go into further detail with in this video. The past is something that is here now in the present, something that is inescapable, something which gradually comes back, gradually is discovered. It creeps back, the secrets of the past. And this house is an old Victorian house, and it has all these secrets. And we mentioned that the wild overgrowth of plants also reflect this idea of something from the past. In this house they have been taking off the plaster, so cleaning this house has brought forth new things on the walls, a huge image of the previous owner of the house, and they find out that this is actually about them. This family on the wall is them. So there we have this idea that the past is in the present, which is a very central theme in the story. Having pulled the plaster off the walls in chapter 3, then in chapter 4, everyone goes to bed, and Nick, he's thinking about how it's almost as if the plaster came off the walls of its own volition, and that's a quote. He says on page 43, "The extraordinary thing is that although every inch of the paper had been a struggle to remove, and he had blisters on the palms of his hands to prove it, his last impression before he drifts off to sleep is that the portrait had risen to the surface of its own volition, of its own free will." So here's the idea that the past is not just something that you discover. No, the past discovers you. The past catches up with the present. And there's this mystical, slightly spooky theme, but actually more existential, because it tells us something about what it is to be a human being. And he continues that it would have been impossible to keep it hidden any longer. The idea that there's some dark secret, there's something that could have been hidden, but no, it can't. Rather, as a mass of rotting vegetation, long submerged, will rise suddenly to the surface of a pond. So the idea is that the plants, rotting plants, all plants in a pond, they eventually will rise, even though they may be on the bottom for a long while. So the plants, these plants from nature, symbolize this rotten past, this past that's been hid away. And we remember, of course, that Gareth was telling Miranda that there was another girl who lived there before them, and that she jumped into the cistern in the garden. That there's a girl in the past that's committed suicide by jumping into the cistern, and Miranda has all these awful thoughts and thinks about maybe she should do it, because Gareth has also told her that her father has said things about her, which actually he hasn't. But so there we have this theme of a pond or a cistern. So that's the symbol of, there's the surface and then there's what's underneath, and that's the past. This of course has to do with time, but it also has to do with the self. It's also consciousness. So there's the surface of a person, of one's consciousness, but then there's also what you find when you go deeper into yourself. The house also symbolizes that. It's a classic symbol of a person, of a soul, of a self, and you can have different layers. You can go down in a cellar, and you have many stories from literature that explores that symbolism. So time and selfhood, because obviously your selfhood is related to your origins, your history, your family history. Those things can't be disconnected. And while Nick falls asleep, then Miranda wakes up, and she is alright. So in order to continue, Miranda, she has some sort of inner connection to whatever's hidden in the past, some sort of sense of these secrets, and that's why she's having all her depressions, and why she's walking around in the middle of the night in the house. And likewise, Jasper, the baby boy, there's some thematic connection between him and the past and nature. Being a baby, he has that innocence of nature, that not being aware, not being conscious, not being rational as an adult. And on page 45 it says, "In the room that has always been the nursery, Jasper sleeps in the cot he's almost outgrown. His hands, raised on either side of his head, are curled like new fern fronds." So his hands are being compared to this plant, the fern and pine. So his body is like a plant. That's the comparison. A cloud begins to drift across the moon. A shadow encroaches on the pillow, and Jasper whimpers as it passes over his face. So whatever happens out in nature, when the cloud is passing over, when the moon is shining, his body reacts to that. So he becomes a symbol of nature, and nature is this place that has this direct connection to the past, to the soul, to the something inner, something to do with instinct, something to do with something hidden. Yes. All right. So this is the theme of the past in chapter 4, and in chapter 5 it keeps going. Here, Nick is thinking about the past. He's thinking about his childhood. He's thinking about growing up and his dad being a teacher and having to call his dad not dad but sir, and his mother for matron, because that's how it was in those days. And being a child where your dad is the headmaster is not really very nice for him, because the other pupils distrust him and they think he's telling his dad about whatever they're doing. So he's got some things in his childhood that aren't so nice. He also has a memory of another boy giving him a Chinese burn. so hurting his arm, and this, for some reason, he now remembers. These things from the childhood obviously affect him in the present, and one has to wonder if there's any connection between what he experienced as a child and his present difficulty in his marriage. Well, that's of course, it's always something that can so easily be done. You can always so easily see connections, but here we have to notice that there is his past and then there is his present, and of course we're looking for any connections. Then he visits his grandfather Georgie in the hospital. Georgie is 101 years old, so it's an old man. It's quite extraordinary because Nick, we find out, is in his late 40s, so he's like 47, 48, and he's still got his grandfather who is 101, and that grandfather fought in First World War and has got a scar from the First World War. So a scar is also a symbol of how the past is present now, how it's still here. And at the moment the grandfather is ill with cancer, incurable cancer, and has a wound in the stomach because of that cancer in the stomach, and he thinks that it's actually the scar that's hurting. It's so here cancer and the wound from First World War, the scar, become one and the same. So the present hardship and the hardship of the past are one and the same. This theme we find at so many places in this novel. He's an old man, thin, but always has been erect and a proud man, but now he's wrinkled and worn, and he's compared to Caravaggio's Saint Jerome. So Caravaggio, this painter from the Baroque era, and Saint Jerome, the Christian saint from the 5th century. And incidentally, I actually have this painting here in a book. So Saint Jerome, this man that's been working and working and working for years, and he's got the wrinkles in his head, he's got the beard, he's got everything. The description in that chapter of the body is worth noticing because the body is important. The body is the place of history. It's the place through which we experience life, experience the present, and experience this physical world. That's why we have this, in the early chapters, we have the youngsters, Miranda in particular, experiencing some budding sense of sexuality. That's the body, and time that's really brought into focus through that. And here in this chapter we have the old man's old body, and again it's time. His time's just moved on, and now he's in the same body, but it's a different body. It's an old body. It says, it goes like this on page 47. His cheeks are furrowed over naked gums. The neck protruding from the gown is thin and scaly. There's several days' growth of beard on his chin, but he doesn't look inconsiderable or pathetic. He looks like Caravaggio's portrait of Saint Jerome. So, an old man, but not pathetic. That means not weak, not someone that you that seems weak and despicable. He's also got his legs shaved. Here you read on page 55. Do you know they shaved me legs as well? Notice me legs. This is Britain. This is England. It's a working class England. And you notice that many. So talking about the language or the way he speaks, it's important to notice because it evokes the place. It evokes the society, the people. Because this is not just a novel about one person, one family. It goes beyond that. It's about a place, a culture, a country, and a history, a First World War, which involved many more people. And to wrap it up, the past. How do we relate to the past? How do the characters relate to the past? Georgie avoids the past. He avoided everything else to do with the war, never spoke of it, it says on page 57. He avoids it. Why was he avoided? Well, clearly there are some painful memories, and he's also been violent to some extent toward his daughter, Frida, who's called Auntie Frida. It says, Auntie Frida's been mistaken for a German soldier more than once, quote on page 63. So obviously the past is disturbing him and coming back to him. It's an inescapable past. And the daughter, Miranda, Nick's daughter, seeks it out. She's curious. Her stepmother, Fran, really avoids it. The son, Jasper, embodies this instinctive, this presence, this natural past, and the grandfather, Nick's grandfather, is also an embodiment of the past, but someone who has left it and also avoids it. So that's enough for now.